Here.
Mrs. Bream,
Here.
Mr. Francis,
He's absent.
Mr. Hoff,
Here.
Mr. Hoover,
He is absent.
Mrs. Irwin Adams,
She is absent.
Mr. Johnston,
Here.
Mr. Cruz,
At this time, he's absent.
Dr. Malloy.
Here.
Was that 5?
That's 5. I believe everything is on the agenda. Let's just do it straight from the agenda. If you don't mind, Sharon, I'm just gonna run us through the obligatories. If everybody can rise and do the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To
the flag
of the United States
of America
and to the
republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think I can speak for Sharon and say thank you to everybody. Neither of us wanted to call this on such short notice, but this is a legally required meeting and presentation, which is the reason it's being live streamed. This is not a voting meeting. This is a one topic discussion. And I would like at this time to turn that over to Mr. McShane.
Thank you, Dr. Prietel. Again, I don't think anybody wants to have a meeting on a Friday night, but based upon what we're about to talk about, we thought it was imperative that we had this meeting sooner than later so that we could potentially put the district in a position to take advantage of current low interest rates on some of their debt. So from a standpoint of how we got to where we are today, why we're meeting today, we are constantly talking to your administration. We've been talking to them over the past 2 years about how, when, and why it might make sense to refund some of your outstanding debt. And there's two main causes that would cause us to refund your outstanding debt. One has to do with, in general, interest rates being low enough. And secondly, there was potential for some legislative changes that could work to the benefit of the district. So we've been monitoring that. We had a meeting set up for 2 days ago, and heading into that meeting, something else occurred. Even though the economy is starting to heat up from COVID, even though rates were increasing slightly over the past 4 months, all of a sudden going into our meeting last week, and I would say out of nowhere, because even most economists didn't see this happening, we saw interest rates all of a sudden drop down 25 basis points within a 4-day period. So all of a sudden, where we were really just talking about information on what's happening in the market, we had a situation where it was a full stop and said, geez, we've got really some really good numbers to talk about. We really need to put this to the front burner and get in front of the school board and let them know what's happening in the market and what it could mean to the district. And that's why we're here, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I don't know if Paula or Sue or Camilla or someone can pull up the presentation. Is it available to be pulled up? Do we have that available?
Sue has it. Dr. P, if you can give her control.
Paula's going to have to do that. Paula, can you do that?
It's available.
Okay. Sue, bring her up.
It's telling me the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Paula's the host.
Yeah, and screen sharing's on, Sue.
There it is. Thank you.
Also, Camilla, once she puts this up, can you do me a favor and send this out to the entire board? I was too busy today trying to get my computer up and running. This is a different machine for me also.
Absolutely.
Perfect. There we go. Let's start on page 2. Page 2 quickly is just, this is something that all board members you want to have handy at all times. This is a summary of your outstanding debt. On the very top, there are 3 different amortization schedules. The first is your 2013. That was what was used to finance the construction of the junior high school. And then next, that's your series of 2018, and then series of 2018A. That's how the bonds amortize. And what I think important to point out from this amortization table is that, look at the 2013, you're going to have that paid off by the year 2034. So just roughly 13 years left on that. And then the 2018s and 18As go out somewhat longer, just short of 29 years. At the very bottom is a quick summary of all this. You can see principal currently outstanding on the 13s is roughly 35 million. On the 18s, roughly just under 35. And on the 18As, 47.5. More importantly, under interest rates, those are the interest rates that are associated with each one of these issues. The 13s have rates ranging from 2.6 to 4, 18s 3% to 5, and then the 18As 2 to 5%. Right-hand column labeled call date. This is the dates we're always monitoring in the district, because these are the dates that you can take all your debt off on a tax-exempt basis and issue new bonds. Up until 2018, you were always allowed to refund your debt in advance of that call date one time. In fact, the 2013s was what's called an advance refunding. So it refunded the 2008s in advance of their call date. You were able to lock in rates. In 2018, with the large change in the tax code, they took away the ability for school districts, municipalities, anybody that could issue tax exempt debt to refund it on a tax exempt basis in advance. So that went away. What issuers are doing, though, is because rates have dropped so low, sometimes it makes sense to issue taxable bonds. And a good question is, well, what's the difference between a taxable bond and a tax exempt bond? And the only difference is the buyer doesn't get a tax advantage for buying the bonds, so they want a slightly higher interest rate. And in today's market, that rate can range from 0.8% higher to 1% higher, depending on the maturity. So that's what we've been talking to the district about. We've been asking them, well, if rates are, if we can't do it tax exempt, where are taxable rates, and does it make sense? And that's what we're going to talk about on the next page, on page 3. So we've had this modeled up, we've been looking at it, and on page 3, and we're going to break this into 2 parts. We looked at each individual bond issue, and are rates low enough on a taxable basis today to refund the outstanding debt? And what you're going to see highlighted in yellow is if you were to take all that debt away, replace it with lower interest rate rates, not change anything, only change the interest rate. So you don't extend the debt, you don't increase the payments. All you do is take advantage of a lower rate. You can see highlighted in yellow each refunding issue and what it would do for the district's debt service. So for instance, the first column labeled 2013 refunding taxable, you would save roughly $1,221,000 over the life of the issue by taking it out. And that's the highest we've seen this issue since we've been monitoring it. On the middle column is a taxable refunding of the outstanding 2018s. That's going to give you cash flow differential of roughly 6.2 million. And these are highlighted at the very bottom in highlighted in yellow of those cash flows. You can see the total. So it's 6.2 for the 2018s, and then a refunding of the 2018A using taxable bonds would be roughly 4.2 million. Now let's just focus on the 2018 and 2018A. Those are relatively large numbers, and it typically would make sense to start moving forward with the refunding of those. However, what they've been talking about since the change in presidents is the potential to bring back the ability to refund it on a tax exempt basis. And what we've done is monitored that, and then we modeled that up to say, okay, if they were to bring that back, what would that do to the savings and what would that do to the interest rates? At the very bottom of those 2 columns, we modeled it up to see what that would bring to the table in terms of ultimate savings. If they were to change that, it would go to a total net present value savings of 9 million for the 18s and 8.4 for the 2018As. We've seen proposals, we've seen it come to the forefront, but what we haven't seen from Washington is any movement on anything currently. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but it could happen, and we're monitoring it. And there's a lot of people in the same position to you that have refundings that they're monitoring, and they're going to have to make a decision sometime. Is it worth waiting, or do you move forward with the taxable refunding? Because these issues almost double the amount of savings if it's done on a tax exempt basis. Every time we talked to the administration, we sat down, talked to Mrs. Bream about this. And this is a gut feeling. Where is Washington? And are they going to pass this? My gut, and this is just my gut, and it's based on nothing. You wait out to see what type of legislation's brought to the table in terms of the Infrastructure Act. If it's part of that, then there's a good chance it passes and they leave it in, and you can reap the benefits of those higher savings. So those two, we're going to monitor, we're going to keep an eye on, we're going to keep an eye on Washington to see if it makes sense. The first issue, the 2013, isn't available for a tax exempt refunding on an advance basis. So that issue, all of a sudden, where rates are today, it does make sense to bring to the forefront and start talking about it. So that's what we're talking about today, getting documents prepared, putting you in a position to take advantage of a market that has dropped down dramatically in the past 4 days, so that you might be able to take advantage of it and lock in these savings. Now, even though we're having this meeting, we're talking about it today, if you recall, it still takes roughly 3 to 4 weeks to prepare all documentation, get our ducks in a row, get a rating in place, lock in bond insurance, and then have all the legal ads put in order to lock in a rate. So there's still some exposure, but if we start today and we start running with it, potentially by your August 2nd meeting, we could be in a position to lock in rates sometime right after that meeting. Now, we know there's a lot of exposure in the next 3 weeks, and it could work against us, but we're going to draft a resolution that sets a minimum target amount that says if you can't save X dollars, then you won't move forward with the refunding. And based on the size of that transaction, our recommendation would be to set a target of $1 million savings or more in order to move forward with that transaction. So if we start working on this and rates move against us and we pass that resolution, all we do is we put it on the shelf. We don't do anything, we don't refund it, we leave it outstanding. And only if it falls within that sweet spot of saving over $1 million do we actually move forward with anything. Now, just I started the conversation out, I don't know if everybody was on, but there's been a lot of volatility in the marketplace. In fact, up to a week ago, everyone, all you could hear on, any economist talk about was, is inflation transitory? Is it hyperinflation? It's going to come back. Are we having too much, too fast in the economy? This all would drive rates up. What you've heard talked about in the last 3 days is that the global economy isn't strong enough. So even though in the realm of the US, we might have inflation globally because most economies are still weak, most global countries are still being hit with the Delta virus, that you're seeing inflows into the United States market, which is helping drive rates lower currently and helping, that 25 basis point move happen today. So we sort of, if you're looking at the mixture of what's going to happen in the market, it seems like we have a sweet spot where we might be able to take advantage of this if we move quickly enough and lock in rates, but could also move against this. But as of today, it looks like if this makes sense to the board, we start moving forward with preparation of documents so that come August 2nd, if rates stay where they are today, we're in a position to lock in rates for the district and lower your interest cost. If you want to go to the final page, it's just a good chart to look at, and this will be available to you when you see in your packet. But you can see from this chart, that's a 10-year graph of the municipal market for a 20-year bond. And you can see highlighted or pulled out portion. So that grabs the last year where rates have been. In August, late August of last year was the all-time low in the municipal market. And you can see highlighted on the right-hand side of that pulled out graph, we're very near those all-time lows today. So from an interest rate perspective, you know, a lot of our clients always ask, do we do it now? Do we wait? Can rates go lower? Well, if we're near the all-time low, I think we're in a good position where locking in this portion, that makes sense, because I don't know that rates have that much lower to go. They could, but based upon where rates have been in the last 40 years, it seems like we're kind of near the bottom. And on top of that, you know, I call this transaction the tail. This is your smallest piece of debt. By preparing documents today on this piece, locking in rates, it also puts us in a better position that if they do change that legislation, we'll be able to be in a position to act swiftly to maybe do the next two issues on a tax exempt basis. Because when they do change that legislation, it's not just Altoona, it's every school district, every municipality, every county in the United States that's going to try to move forward in the market very quickly to lock in refundings that they couldn't do up until that point. So obviously, if volume increases, that's going to drive rates up as well. So there's a lot of good that can come from this first transaction, and hopefully a lot more good potentially in the fall of this year if they were to change that legislation. So that's a lot of information, a lot of market analysis. Please take some time to digest it. If there's any questions, you know, we're glad to take them at this time, or any thoughts on, you know, where your opinions are from a school board perspective on, you know, what you think you should do. So please ask away.
If they don't change the law, then the 2018 and 2018A, at what point would we lose the savings that you have presented here?
Well, so those are as of today, and it's just like a mortgage that until you lock in, if rates go up, those savings go down. So my thought process is, we're sort of in a quick window here. I personally thought that something would have, this piece of legislation is going to be part of a bigger package. And since nothing has gotten done up to this point, with the new administration being in, you know, over 6 months now, we really have to start scratching our head as a board, as your advisor, from your administration, of how long do we wait for that to change, and when does it make sense to forget about waiting for Washington to do something and then just lock in rates yourself. So there's no clear answer to that, but I think it's probably within the next 1 to 2 months. And by getting this first piece ready, as soon as we're done with that, we're back and talking again, saying, what do we do? Here's where rates are on the other two pieces. Do we wait? Do we keep waiting? Has there been movement in Washington? Or do we just lock in rates on those two pieces as well? The flip side of, once we do flip that switch and once we do that refunding, you have to wait another 10 years. So those are your two largest pieces. We want to make sure that whatever we do with those pieces, it's the right time. So it is in my mind, that's a bigger decision than the refunding of the 2013s, because there's a lot of savings on the table there.
To me, I think it's a no-brainer. I think anytime you can refinance and save on interest rates and get a significant amount of money from that, you have to go for it. I think John's idea of identifying a target of $1 million is something that, you know, makes a lot of sense. And that's quite you think in terms of taxpayer dollars, in terms of mills, that's about a third of a mill. That I think a mill right now brings in about 3.2 million. So that is significant. And I think we need to be prepared to get that kind of savings for our school district, for both the 2013 as well as the 2018 bonds. We got to be ready for it. And if the opportunity's there, go for it.
Well, this is quite a lot more if you add in the 2018s.
Right.
Yes.
Now, first of all, John, if you can get me some language regarding the legislation that you're talking about with the municipal refunding,
Sure.
I will definitely write to our Congressman John Joyce and I will write to our senators, Toomey and Casey. And I will push them to support that because I think that benefits us significantly. One thing I understand, this $1 million is your, when he talks about that 1.227, that's our gross savings over the life of the bond, but it represents approximately $90,000 to $100,000 a year worth of budgetary savings to the district, which quite frankly is a significant piece of savings just in and of itself. Anything else? Go ahead, sorry.
This will be on the agenda then for August 2nd?
As long as the market is solid for it, yes.
And that the agenda item will just, at this point, we're just gonna have the agenda for the 2013. But because we have everything set up, if we need to add the other two pieces or they change the legislation from a Washington standpoint, that's easy to be added. So this is gonna help us get to the refunding of the other two easier when that time comes. But at this point, it's just gonna be the 2013. Unless the board decides that they don't want to wait and you wanted to lock in rates, which is your decision.
Also, we have 2 meetings in August. So we very easily, we can do the first, if the board chooses to do the first refunding on the 2nd, 2 weeks later on the 16th, if the market changes, we're in a position to move forward with that option with the 18A and 18s also.
Correct, yes.
And if I'm not, if I'm understanding correctly what we met the other day, the savings, if, you know, Washington does what you're hoping that they're going to do, that savings could jump from 11 million to 17 million?
Actually to 18.
Yeah, that's an
Well, yeah, 18.
8 on top of the million, on top of the 13 million. That's 18 on top of the million from the 2013.
Right.
So that's an additional 18.
Which
And
is
we
going to
have-
mean the equivalent of an entire tax increase in savings annually, if we were to go to the maximum of exceptions or the maximum of the index.
I always hate presenting ifs and buts because they never work out. But I think in this case, you have to look at what potentially could change, especially when it's such a large number. But I never count on anything from Washington for sure.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions?
Sounds good to me.
Pretty good.
So
Pretty straightforward, everybody.
Yep.
Sharon, would you like to adjourn the meeting for me?
Yes, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Again, happy birthday, Frank.
On a Friday.
Night,
Oh,
everybody.
happy birthday, Frank.